how's it going? It is Monday, July 13th, and this is the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. We're on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe, follow us on SoundCloud, and support us on Patreon. Today we'll get some coronavirus updates. The U.S. announced a formal withdrawal from the WHO, and the Sunday sermon, the message about God always resolving our problems and issues through the Word. So how are you guys doing today? I know it's a new week and we just had an amazing weekend. I hope you guys had a cool weekend too. It just felt so nice to be able to go out here in Malaysia after being trapped in my house for about 4 months. But I am starting to think I really need to exercise because just eating out way too much. I think I'm just making up for all the 4 months I didn't go out to eat. But for here in Malaysia, the good news is we're going to start team sports from Wednesday, thank God, so we can go out and play soccer, play volleyball. You know, we can play team sports. So we're already preparing ourselves to play some ultimate frisbee this Wednesday. I've lost 5 kilograms since the MCO. But now I really need to get myself in shape. But I'm just really grateful and thankful for all of you joining us here on the Morning Star Drive. Please like and comment below. And we want to hear how you guys are doing. Make a request, your questions of what you guys think about these segments. We had a Lockdown Tuesday Bubble Talk last week. And we talked about the story of Peter and how to make hard decisions. So for those of you who haven't seen it, go ahead and check those out. 2 videos out on our YouTube channel, Espresso with Sky. And we definitely encourage everyone to check out the live Lockdown Tuesday and Bubble Talks every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Malaysia time. It is live streaming on both YouTube and Facebook. And you can ask questions in real time. And just to let you know, every Thursday we're giving away free bubble tea. Every Thursday. So if you come to the Bubble Talks, we're going to give some prizes out every week. All right. Yesterday was a Sunday edition. And we interviewed a member in Korea, Catherine Poon. So make sure you check it out. And big shout outs to Ann Shaw in the US, now in Japan, and Claudia and Esther in Malaysia for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support us too, then check out the Patreon link in the description. And if you're on SoundCloud, click the blue button on the home page. And for those of you who just want to do lecture training, you can join us on Patreon also. It's already in full swing. We have people participating from 10 different countries in the world. And if you want to join too, just click on the blue button on SoundCloud, and also we have the link to the description below. All right, let's move into the featured artist of the day. And cool thing is, we're gonna kind of move in a little bit, and we're gonna play an extra song today. So today's featured artist of the day is the Somni Boys. And we're going to listen to an older song, one of those songs that's kind of like a summer song, and a song that can start the week off really well, featuring Mariah Henry, one of my favorite songs from the Somni Boys. It is Together with the Lord. And the second song is from Kumachang, and that song is Fighter. And the third song we're going to play today is going to be a Chinese song. So we're going to have like an English, a Japanese, and a Chinese song today. And the Chinese song is an old song, but great song from Malaysia, KOG, and that song is called Promise Till the End. So guys, let's just sit back, relax, let's enjoy this music. Comes from our members from around the world.
We believe in the same God, but we are on different levels.
Put your hands in the sky if you feel alive. All the stories that we made, just you and I. Never losing all the passion. All this love is my obsession. Oh my gosh, this feeling got me heat stroke. His love like a billion pots about to heat though. I ain't never breaking from this bond, cause you and I are only one.
If you ain't living with the Lord, then who you with?
Who you with?
If you ain't living with the Lord, then who you with? You with? You 함께 together with the Lord every day, all day. You 함께 together with the Lord all day, all day. You 함께 together with the Lord every day, all day. You 함께 together with the Lord all day, all day.
Together with the Lord, I'm living my best life. Don't worry about a thing, you know it's only Sunny life. We sing about memory stories that we share. We'll fall deeper in love as we stop and just stare. My eyes only on you, they sparkle with love. Don't forget my charm too. There will never be another. Live this life only for you. I give you this promise that I will hold true.
If you ain't living with the Lord, then who you with?
Who you with?
If you ain't living with the Lord, then who you with? You with? You 함께 together with the Lord every day, all day. You 함께 together with the Lord all day, all day. You 함께 together with the Lord every day, all day.
この先は自分のためのステージ、生きるという最初の1ページ。I'm a fighter、 心の中で唱えた、自分に負けたくないと思えた。だけど途絶えた、行いがないならばまるで燃料切れのライター。誰が何と思うと関係ない、一瞬の判断で決まるリブは大。締めるベルト、道がアスファルトでも進むウエスト、尽くすベスト。夢と現実の狭間で揺れ動いてる。だけど絶対諦めない。戦い続けるため、己に打ち勝つまで挑戦し続けるだけ。どんな壁も突き破れ、心に火を灯せ。熱くないなら嘘だろ。靴底は全て知ってる、歩んできた道のりを見据える。いや道のりの実の字もまだ来てねえ。諦めるのなら実りもねえ。感覚を研ぎ澄ませ、今刻め、生きるという最高の1ページ。どんな失敗も恐れなくていい、何度転んでも起き上がればいい。自分の感情を信じてスタンダップ、立ち止まってもソウルまで捨てんな。夢と現実の狭間から逃げ出したくなる。だけどこの勝負負けられない。戦い続けるため、己に打ち勝つまで挑戦し続けるだけ。どんな壁もぶち壊せ、心に火を灯せ。自分で選んだ道なら、熱くないなら嘘だろ。そう、お前は決して一人じゃないだろう。
那年仲夏天，山地中百合花盛开了。思念把你我紧紧靠近。
那年的誓言，我仍坚守着，不曾改变。你的眼泪，我终于看见。
你的话语穿透我灵魂，你的爱紧贴我身边。
牺牲了所有，只为了我们能真正得到自由。我愿爱你永久。
相约到永久，哪怕天地都过去，为爱的牺牲，受尽了风霜，我愿为你守候。
相约到永久，走进我该走的路。我深爱着你，
你深爱着我，
永不分离。 守着不曾改变。你的泪水，我终于看见。
你的话语穿透我灵魂，你的爱紧贴我身边。
牺牲了所有，只为了我们能真正得到自由。我愿爱你永久，相约到永久。哪怕天地都过去，为爱的牺牲，受尽了风霜，我愿为你守候，相约到永久，走进我该走的路。我深爱着你，
你深爱着我，
永不相约到永久。哪怕天地都过去，为爱的牺牲，受尽了风霜，我愿为你守候，相约到永久，走进我该走的路。我深爱着你，
你深爱着我，
永不分离。
And that was Promise to the End, or Promise Till the End, and that's from the Malaysia KOG. And that's an old song. That's from a long time ago. Great song, though. And also the songs before that we heard was Kuma Chung singing Fighter, and also Somebody Boys featuring Mariah Henry with Together with the Lord. All right, so that brings us into the coronavirus updates for the weekend. So we have a lot of days of catching up. We know that Monday always has the worst news because we haven't seen each other for like 2.5 days. So we look at the coronavirus, like the global rate at the moment is 12.9 million. We're right at about 13 million cases now, 568,000 deaths at 4.41%, which means there was a drastic drop in the mortality rate in the global picture. The US too, big drop. They have 3.3 million cases, 137,000 deaths at 4.09%, which means probably by the end of this week, we're going to be under 4%, which is great news. Brazil, 1.8 million cases, 71,000 deaths, and the mortality rate is well under 4% now at 3.88%. India, they also dropped in the mortality rate, 867,000 cases, 23,000 deaths at 2.63%. Mexico, almost hitting 300,000 cases with 295, with 35,000 deaths and 11.76%. And the interesting thing about this is it went down 0.2% in the mortality rate, which is a great sign. South Africa, 264,000 cases, 4,000 deaths at 1.5%. And of course, the Philippines, 54,000 cases, 1,300 deaths at 2.53%, which means one good sign is the top 5 countries, they all went down the mortality rate, and the global mortality rate went down really low. If you look at Sweden's down to 7.38%, which is great news over there too, because they were at 12-13% just a few months ago. Belgium's at 15.62%. And they're kind of staying around that range a little. They were at just over 16%, so they're kind of staying in the same range. When we look at the cases, the daily cases, the U.S., once again, over 60,000 cases for the day at 2% growth. 62,000 for the U.S. Brazil's at 36,000 at 2% growth. And also India, 28,000. So they're about to hit 30,000 pretty soon at a 3% growth rate in cases or infections in a day. South Africa, they have new records, 13,000 cases in a day, which is a 5% growth. And finally, we have Mexico at 6,900 cases at a 2% growth rate. And that brings us into kind of the current news for the day. And the current news is kind of shocking because it is the U.S. Formally announced that they'll be leaving the WHO, and it was actually President Trump that made the announcement, and the president does have power to do this. It takes about a year, but they do have power to do this. So it's interesting because even though he formally decided to leave the WHO, it really depends if he gets elected or not in November. right? Because if he doesn't get elected, most likely Biden will go back into the WHO. But if Trump gets elected again, then they will probably be leaving the WHO. But that's something that can be discussed later. So let's just take a look at what's going on with and the one great thing what Sunseep talked about is you guys we got to know the news, right? The news. Sunseep said in such a powerful way yesterday. He said the news is God's. That you have to see it like God's word. Okay, that's pretty powerful. So I'm really thankful that I'm not just preaching the news, but I'm actually preaching God's word. It makes me feel a lot better, right? Like, oh, it's not spiritual, but no, it is spiritual because this is God's word. Amen. Hallelujah. All right. So the U.S. formally leaving the WHO, and this was ever since even before coronavirus started. Trump was talking about leaving the WHO, and a couple of big notable things is number one is they're the biggest contributor to the WHO, and another thing is they're not the only country scrutinizing the WHO at the time. They look at the WHO with gross negligence, and it needs massive reform in there. So the formal notice to leave the WHO came on July 6th. It came like last Friday, I believe, Friday or Saturday. But it means that because there's an entire year, it means that the U.S. cannot formally leave until July 6th, 2021, right? Basically, the threat that Donald Trump gave in April was there has to be these massive changes, and he gave like a list of things that the WHO should be doing. And of course, there's not like massive investigations or things like they're not really doing anything differently than before. So the formal announcement has finally been given. Of course, scholars and scientists are condemning the U.S. for leaving the WHO. The WHO has a very, very good, the role they play in the world is very good, right? Just the concept itself when they came right after World War II. And it was just the agreements after World War II that the world would be a far better place if everyone collaborated to achieve a better life, right? So, some people don't think that the WHO had gross negligence. And some people thinking that Donald Trump, the President Trump is trying to look for a scapegoat. And of course, there is some good in the WHO too. It needs reform, but it doesn't need to be destroyed. So it's kind of something that's being debated over right now. Like, why are they leaving and what's the effect right now? So the leaving is rooted in the issue with China, right? So the WHO hasn't done enough to investigate. They've kind of been just following whatever China wants. China, at this moment, it looks like they have a lot of control over the WHO and how things go. And it's kind of ever since power has risen in China. Like how they became a financial power, world power. So a lot of, this is not just the U.S., but a lot of other countries are saying that there's too much control of the working of the UN. And they say that China has too much control in the workings of the UN. And a lot of lobbyists share this sentiment too. So when you look at U.S. and China too, it's kind of like China is the U.S.'s number one target, and U.S. is China's number one target. And the rising status of China is kind of, because of the rising status of China, the U.S. is always thinking about how to combat. And of course, there's trade wars going on all the time. And then ever since coronavirus started, it kind of became another reason to fight against China. Not just the U.S., but we're talking multiple countries. But, for the U.S. too, especially, it becomes another reason to fight China. Especially because China, it seems like they were hiding what was happening with the pandemic. And in April, like I said before, they stopped funding for the WHO for 30 days because they wanted them to make some changes. And then they made the withdrawal announcement and then became official just last week. And there were some people in Congress saying, does the president have the authority to do this? And the answer is yes. He has authority to do it, but they also get 1 year to check it out. He can't do it right off the bat. It won't come into effect until 1 more year later. So when you look at the start of the election campaign in 2016 when Trump first went for it, after Trump got elected, they left the Paris Climate Accord. They left the Iran nuclear deal. And another big one that people were really upset about was the Human Rights Council that the U.S. left. But this was not just Trump's idea. Even the ambassadors or the people representing America in the Human Rights Council, they wanted to leave because they said it was basically corrupt. Because it's the Human Rights Council, and you have countries like China and other countries that have terrible human rights records that are running it. So let me give you an example of what happened. I'm talking just recently. This happened recently in the Human Rights Council. So this is why some people still support they support that the U.S. left the UN Human Rights Council. So everyone knows that China passed a law for Hong Kong, right? The new security law. And basically everyone in a free country is like, okay, this spells the end of freedom and autonomy for Hong Kong. And it's basically, this freedom was a foundation of its prosperity. But they just had a recent vote in the Human Rights Council, and the amount of countries supporting China beat the countries that were not supporting. You gotta listen to this carefully. What China is doing in Hong Kong, like this takeover with the new security laws, 53 nations supported China, saying, this is what they said, 53 nations, saying that it's a better guarantee for the Hong Kong, better long-term stability for Hong Kong, better for Hong Kong, and a safer environment for them to exercise legal rights of freedom. 53 countries supported this in the Human Rights Council, and 27 were against it. And guess what? Who were the countries that were supporting China? Cuba, North Korea, Iran, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Venezuela, Palestine. These are all countries that are very, very similar, and they support China, right? And guess who were the 27 countries that were completely against China, coming and taking over Hong Kong? It was like the UK, Australia, the US, Canada, Germany, France, Sweden, New Zealand, Japan. You gotta think about this. It's like this is like another world of the communist and socialism versus like the democratic freedom. But this is a Human Rights Council. They think it's okay. The Human Rights Council voted okay, 53-27. So you kind of get an idea that this is kind of why that the U.S. left the Human Rights Council, because you got to think about it. Even though China is no longer in the Human Rights Council, they have so much power because all these countries are the ones that are either a very similar regime or they're indebted to China. So it's like, what do you do in this situation? So, it's quite interesting. So since President Trump became president, they left the Human Rights Council, which a lot of people will agree, even though some disagree. They left the Paris Climate Accord, and it's really interesting because even right now, even though Biden says he'll go back into it, a lot of people are now saying that it doesn't really help. It doesn't really do any effect for the climate. And then the Iran nuclear deal. So those are the three things that he left, and now you're going to add WHO to that. It's very, very interesting, but we have, we have to really study and find out what it really means. So, there's so many things going on right now, and experts feel that the WHO is a force for good, but they also criticize the WHO because they're so bureaucratic and way too slow. So what happened in 2014 with the Ebola virus outbreak, it was way too slow to the point that Obama went ahead even before the WHO said anything. They went in and started working with other countries to go and try and fix the Ebola virus. And basically, a lot of people said if the WHO acted a little bit sooner, they would have prevented disease, and they could have done even more. A lot of people wouldn't have died. And it's kind of the same thing that they're saying with the coronavirus. They could have made a quicker response, and people could have survived much more. And if you think about the U.S. leaving the WHO, there's a lot of things that could happen. But think about it. The very first thing we talked about is they are the largest voluntary donor of the WHO, which means the WHO is going to have a huge financial hit. Just to give you an idea of how much they donated, America donated almost $900 million in 2018, more than double the next generous country, which was the UK at $435 million. So you're talking about a huge chunk of the costs, which means that this huge chunk is going to be difficult for other members of the UN, of the WHO to make up. It's a sizable revenue, right? There's one, which means if a lot of money goes out, then projects will be, will stop. Research will be stunted. Vaccines will be difficult. Many works are going to be undone. And the global fight against world health issues is going to slow down from the WHO, right? So, and other experts feel that, if the U.S. leaves the WHO, then Trump is basically strengthening the status of China in the WHO. And with the WHO, many smaller countries are relying on the WHO to get a lot of health supplies and to help them with vaccines and other things like that too. Another thing that could happen if the U.S. does leave, it could create confusion because they're not going to be working together with the WHO. There could be, if they do things separately, there could be redundancy, or they could be doing things against each other too, right? Because they're completely not working with each other. So when you look at it from a from a broad point of view, I'm sure all of us here can say that we don't know enough to say that whether this is right or wrong. I'm pretty sure all of us can say that. Like, can any of us really say that we know that this is the wrong decision? Where we could see some things like, wow, that was terrible with the Human Rights Council. That doesn't make any sense with that. Oh, this doesn't make any sense either. But does it mean you should dismantle it? Should you start something new? Or we don't know, right? And the most important thing I do believe that all of us have to think about is what does God want from this? Right? What does God want? Right? We could sit here this whole time complaining that how dare the U.S. do? How could President Trump do this? But the thing we have to realize is, what if it's God? You know what I mean? What if it's God working through Donald Trump? Who knows, right? We can't say it's wrong. We can't even say it's right, but we couldn't say we know that it's absolutely wrong, and that's something that we have to pray about. So I hope that all of us here too will really understand that this is a situation that only God can handle. I remember from Brianna Ruiz over there in the U.S. Great Instagram picture basically says that people say this is impossible, but God says nothing is impossible with God. So I think it's something that we have to really open our hearts and our minds to and realize that this is something much bigger, because we know this is a time of judgment, a time, of distress, but we also know that there's a blessing hidden in it, and we have to pray for this. And, today, the 70-day condition, today is the last day. So, if you have extra time, pray, whether in the afternoon or in the evening also. All right. And that brings us into a time of praise. Awesome. Right? So we're going to sing an extra song today too, because I think it's a time that we need to praise and sing and give glory more. So the three songs we're going to hear, number one is Light of Hope. I know you can dance to this one. Second one is On the Lord's Side, a little bit medium. And of course, we're going to end off with a slow song, Love, Forgiveness, and Mercy. So I hope that all of us kind of get our praise groove on, and let's sing these three praise songs together.
I am leaving, turning to the new history, to God's history of providence, there I will go. Providence is the ideal world, the world of freedom and truth, on the green pastures where streams of water overflow. I will live with the Lord, only loving Him, right here in this place, only for His will. Light of hope shine in Providence, still flowers bloom, still the fruits in Providence thrive, because we have the word of the Lord. Oh, the light of hope shines bright.
God's providence history, the last one of salvation, where flowers bloom and fruits grow, heaven on earth history, rough windstorms may come and go, eternal hope history. I shall follow only the Lord, I shall love Him eternally.
Shall I live resenting others, resenting my own brothers? All of you who follow the Lord, let us never change. With never changing hearts, let us love and run to the Lord. It is only His word that becomes a light of hope. So the waves of trials seem to come endlessly,
God's providence history, the last one of salvation, where flowers bloom and fruits grow, heaven on earth history, rough windstorms may come and go, eternal hope history, I shall follow only the Lord, I shall love him eternally. God's providence history, the last one of salvation, where flowers bloom and fruits grow, heaven on earth history, rough windstorms may come and go, eternal hope history, I shall follow only the Lord, I shall love him eternally. God's providence history, the last one of salvation, where flowers bloom and fruits grow, heaven on earth history, rough windstorms may come and go, eternal hope history, I shall follow only the Lord, I shall love him eternally.
My Savior's name on high. We have won, oh providence history. I have received the rapture thanks to him. With this blessing I will give my everything for him. Now I will protect my Lord, standing on his side. I will not forget the conditions he set for me. Now no matter what kind of trials may come, my heart will not crumble, I'll stand with him. The Lord is with me, I will go, and I'll give him glory. Praise to the Lord, my love. And now I'll testify to all the world. I'll preach about the person who made this rapture mine. I'll remember how he showed his love, leading me to this perfect history. Now, as an owner, I'll fulfill the will. I am living to fulfill this 1,000-year history. Now I will protect my Lord, standing on his side. I will not forget the conditions he set for me. Now no matter what kind of trials may come, my heart will not crumble, I'll stand with him. The Lord is with me, I will go, and I'll give him glory. Praise to the Lord, my love. And now I'll testify to all the world. I'll preach about the person who made this rapture mine. are saved by the Lord once again today. Even though you have fallen short, they will make up for what you lack. Train your heart, live with love, mercy and grace. Live like this, live with love, rapture each day, like a God, Spirit Son. Make your heart white as the skies, high as heaven, with love and grace. Up above, they rule with love over this whole world. Even though you have fallen short, they will make up for what you lack. Train your heart, live with love, mercy and grace. Live like this, live with love, rapture each day, like a God, Spirit Son. Make your heart white as the skies, high as heaven, with love and grace. Up above, they rule with love over this whole world. Up above, they rule with love over this whole world. Up above, they rule with love over this whole world.
And that is Love, Forgiveness, and Mercy. I hope you guys enjoyed that song. And of course, the two songs we heard just before that was On the Lord's Side and Light of Hope, an old school song that I'm sure many people were happy to hear once again. And that brings us into the word study of the day. And we're looking at yesterday's Sunday message. And guys, honestly, how many of you were shocked when it ended? Right? I was shocked. It was like the whole service was less than 2 hours, like from praise. And for me, I'm just like, what is going on? Right? Because when Susie first said, okay, I'm done here, like, I've said everything, 26 pages, but now I've done one page, but it looks like I'm done. God said everything. I'm like, huh? But in my head, I was like, Susie always says, I'm done now. Let me just talk about one more thing. And that one more thing lasts another hour or something like that, right? But this time it's just like, yeah, let me just tell you a story. Story ends in like less than 10 minutes. And then he's like, okay, let's pray. I'm like, what? It was so short that right after, like this sounds really funny, but right after service, I went straight to do my laundry. And while doing my laundry, I listened to the entire message again, even before the laundry ended. It was so short. I couldn't believe it. I listened to it a couple times. It wasn't because the message was hard to understand. It was so short. Just listening to, like, the key point was obviously, the Lord will resolve your issues and problems through the word, right? The Lord will resolve it for you. Interestingly short. And I was able to listen to more than 2 times. And, the key point was the key point. So I was kind of looking at a couple things in here that I thought was really interesting as I listened to it more and more. The first thing I listened to was something really cool. Was talking about how fair and how fair God is. And he says that if 2 people have the exact same sin, they will not go through the exact same punishment because God looks at the entire life. And if you think about this, it really does make a difference in some type of ruling. Like even in the world today, that's how people do it. Like let me give an example. Does it make a difference what someone's past is like? And the answer is yes, it does. Like let me give you an example. If you're sitting next to a convicted murderer or rapist, like multiple convictions in rape and murder, are you comfortable sitting next to this person? If the past doesn't matter, then why are people up in arms like when like a child, like someone who's like a child molester moves into the neighborhood? Because it matters. It actually matters. And it does make a difference if you have someone who's super righteous and super like great sitting next to you. Like say, God rest her soul, Mother Teresa was next to you. Wouldn't you feel more safer? Like God was closer? Like, the reality is the past does make a difference in the way we treat each other. And some things weigh more heavily than others. Like the cost of making heavy sins. What's the cost? If you have a really, really bad sin, what's the cost of it? The cost is that people may not trust you as much as before. You have to gain it back. It's not something you just get back just because. When someone is treated differently because of their past, is it fair? Well, it depends on how great the past is, like how bad the past was. Because someone breaks the law, or someone who's lived a super, if you take the 2 extremes, one side will get better treatment and one side gets worse treatment. And it's the same thing as when courts treat people differently. If it's the first offense, second offense, 10th offense, 20th offense, it does make a difference if there are previous convictions. So I think the biggest thing we have to think about is not so much of what we think is fair. It's listening to the words of God, seeing how God does things, and understanding why God's way is the fair way. I think that's kind of the way that we have to see things, more than, hey, that doesn't sound fair. It's more of God's way will always be the most fair, the most just, and the most righteous, which means that when Sunseem says something like 2 people have the exact same sin, one will be treated different than the other, we have to kind of pray and think about why it's the best, because it should be, because it's God's way, right? We know people make small mistakes here and there, and those ones don't make much of a difference. It doesn't if it's small mistakes. But you can also look at it in one sense from a very, very miniaturized view, as like a child who makes the same mistake over and 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 over again, compared to a child doing it for the first time. There's a difference in the way that we treat them. So I thought that was a very, very interesting thing that Sunseem brought up there. The second point that I brought up was God resolves issues and problems with the word. Now, this is kind of straightforward. Super broad statement, because it's very broad, because a lot of times we look at it and say, well, how? Like, yeah, that makes sense, but how? We don't see how it solves all the issues, because it hasn't solved every single issue of ours, right? It's a very big overarching theme that kind of needs to be shown how it's supposed to be done. And I think this is one of the reasons why testimonies are such a powerful thing, is because we hear many things from the word, and sometimes we can't realize it well as someone else who does realize it better. And we hear that testimony like, oh, that's how it works. Oh, yeah, that's how God resolved that issue. Because if it's God's word, it's true. It's got to be true. The only difference is do we realize or understand it at that level yet? And, when another interesting thing, like from that, another side note from when he's talking about God resolving issues, when he said, when you have conflicts with people, you just can't hate them. Now, here's the thing. The one thing I like about this is when Sunseem says, in conflict, don't hate, which doesn't mean you'll never have conflict. So don't feel guilty when you have conflict, because he's not saying never have conflict. He says, in conflict, don't hate. It just means that when conflict comes, we can't hate each other. Right? That's the thing we have to avoid. Conflict is going to come no matter what. It's going to come all the time. But the only thing that we have to watch is that we don't hate each other. Right? They're 2 totally different things. Conflicts will happen in life no matter what. And it's just because we're human. And we have emotions. We have differences. We're different in character, in personality, in thoughts, in methods. So many different things we're just different in. But the main thing Sansim says is just make sure you don't hate while you're in conflict. All right? And I think the last point that I wanted to bring up, which is like, which one I thought was really kind of deep, is the issues must be resolved in the heart first. And that's a really big one that really hit me. And because it's when Sunsi brought up, this is why for the last 6,000 years, now that everything in the Bible has been, what's that word? Everything in the Bible has been interpreted. And everything is made known to human beings. Now God can just love us. Yeah, there's no misunderstandings. There's nothing more to be said. Everything is being told to us. And this is why God can now just love us, which is amazing if you think about it. And it's truth. The truth is, when you resolve the issues of the heart, those really big things, then everything can be resolved. The Lord can resolve issues in your heart without even, and here's the interesting thing. When I was thinking about this, I realized like the Lord can resolve issues in your heart even without talking directly to you or even in front of your face. Like for instance, in 2014, at the very end, December 31st, Sunset gave a message saying you're all forgiven of your sins. And we're like, it's like all of a sudden everyone could breathe again. Like, oh, I can breathe because like all our sins were forgiven at that point. We're like, wow. Never said it to everyone in their face. He just said over the message. At that point, all the other issues you're dealing with are nothing because the largest load was taken off of us. Satan was taken off of us. And that's why it's easier to deal with small things, right? It just makes sense. When you have big pressing issues in your life, if you have big issues so difficult and hard, then what happens is the small ones are easier to deal with when you take off the big load. But if you have a big load, like let's just say that you haven't paid rent in 2 months, you're about to get evicted, you don't have enough money for food, or you're about to, your parents are going to divorce. There's so many things going on. And then one small thing comes in, you just can't take it. It's just too much for you because it's everything together. But when the weight is lifted, you can take on the world. It's so much easier to deal with these other issues and problems when the biggest weight is taken off. So, when I thought about this, it's the big thing that we have to think about is before resolving issues, we have to first look at the issues in each other's hearts. Like that's the number one thing. Like, haven't you seen those arguments? It's like, oh, well, you said this, okay. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry then. All right, are you happy? And that's not it, right? Because it's not dealing with the issue that's in their heart. When someone says, hey, I really felt left out because of this, and this, and you just say sorry, you're actually not dealing with the heart. It's more of, hey, can you please tell me how I made you feel left out? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was going to ask you, it just slipped my mind. I didn't do it on purpose. I'm really sorry that I hurt you, that I made you feel that way. And it's dealing with that issue that hurt them in the first place. The heart issue has to be dealt first before anything else. And I know that there's it's such a short message, and you can listen to this probably 3 times a day, right? It goes by so fast. Like you have to start catching things quickly. And I hope that you guys too will really be able to just open our hearts, open our minds, and realize, wow, this week's message, we just got to listen to it a little bit more deeply. Listen to it on the Tuesday message and such, and you guys will hear something much, much different too every time you listen to it. So I'm really looking forward to the Tuesday pre-dawn message too. Which leads us to the song of choice for the day. And today's song of choice is I'm Canadian, so it's a song it's not Justin Bieber's song. It is featuring him, and it's actually from a country duo, right? 2 guys named Dan and Shay, and it's featuring Justin Bieber, and it's called 10,000 Hours. It's a love song, really sweet song. So it made me think about it's a sweet song. It was very romantic, so it made me think about the Holy Trinity and something too. So they are really big country and pop music duo. And they've already won several awards like Best Duo in Country Music, Best Duo Performance, Best Duo Song. And as a country pop, which is very, it's not like popular music because it's country, but they were able to crack the Billboard Top 40 several times. So I hope that you guys will enjoy this song from Dan and Shay featuring Justin Bieber, and the song is 10,000 Hours.
Do you love the rain? Does it make you dance when you're drunk with your friends at a party? What's your favorite song? Does it make you smile? Do you think of me? When you close your eyes, tell me, what are you dreaming? Everything I wanna know it all. I'd spend 10,000 hours and 10,000 more. Oh, if that's what it takes to learn that sweetheart of yours. And I might never get there, but I'm gonna try. If it's 10,000 hours or the rest of my life, I'm gonna love you. Do you miss the road that you grew up on? Did you get your middle name from your grandma? When you think about you forever now, do you think of me? When you close your eyes, tell me, what are you dreaming? Everything I wanna know it all. I'd spend 10,000 hours and 10,000 more. Oh, if that's what it takes to learn that sweetheart of yours. And I might never get there, but I'm gonna try. If it's 10,000 hours or the rest of my life, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you. Oh, want the good and the bad, everything in between. Oh, that'll cure my curiosity. Oh yeah, I'd spend 10,000 hours and 10,000 more. Oh, if that's what it takes to learn that sweetheart of yours. And I might never get there, but I'm gonna try. If it's 10,000 hours or the rest of my life, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you. Yeah. And I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you.
And that's 10,000 Hours from Dan and Shay featuring Justin Bieber. I hope you guys enjoyed that song. It was a sweet love song, right? And it makes you think of the Holy Trinity. For me, I was like, wow, that's a great song. So I hope that you guys are ready for today's story of the day. And of course, there's so many stories to talk about. So many stories to talk about. So I hope you guys will enjoy this one too. Get inspired and be moved by the Holy Trinity. So this is a story of how I was able to tell my parents that I was in Providence. Even though they saw all the slander. They saw all, my parents are Korean. And the TV broadcast even came all the way to Canada and my parents saw it. So, when I was young, I just want to kind of preface everything. My parents were one of the first generations to come to Canada. They immigrated, I believe, in like 1976, maybe 1975, 76. And they came without knowing any English and with just 5,000 Canadian dollars. And they did well for themselves. They had a couple restaurants, but they couldn't speak English. And then it was like me and my brother, and we couldn't speak Korean. So this is one of the things that was really difficult for me growing up, is because it was kind of the dilemma that these second generation Koreans would come over not knowing Korean, but our parents wouldn't know any English, and there just wasn't enough good communication. So I would have to say that even growing up, I was probably closer to, like, I loved my parents more than I loved my friends, but because of communication, I was much closer to my friends and I'd rather be with them. So it wasn't even until I came to Providence that I started to learn Korean. So almost everything that I've learned is from Providence. And, I started learning Korean probably when I was early 30s. And of course, I'm not fluent right now. Never went to class, never went to school. And most of my life since I moved out of my house when I was 19 and I moved to Los Angeles, so away from my parents. And I think it was God's blessing because at that time I was really able to like just focus on running for Providence, evangelizing, lecturing, teaching, just doing everything that I could. And it was kind of freeing because I didn't have to tell anyone. Like, I know that a lot of you out there living with your parents or the parents are closer. And to be honest, I was kind of jealous of a lot of my friends who were close to their parents. But, it allowed me to really thrive in Providence and just do everything that I need to do without asking parents. From 19, I was basically on my own. Like, I had my uncle there too, but he wasn't someone who was like strict, like to tell me, no, you can't do this. So I probably ran a good 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5, 6 years in Providence. 5 years in Providence without having my parents like breathing down my neck. And then I moved back to Canada and with my parents in 2003 when I graduated from university. And it was a little bit difficult because I'm with my parents now and I kind of get the feeling of like, whoa, I can't say this and that. They've seen the slander and everything else. And there was this one time that there was an event in Hong Kong. And I believe this was like 2006. And I was invited to go visit and see all the places that Sunseem went to. And I was at that time I was working a full-time job, like good job. My parents were so happy about it. And I said, hey mom, Dad, like I couldn't tell them the truth. So I was like, hey mom, Dad, I'm going to, this is what I literally said, I'm going to Baltimore for a work trip. And they're like, oh, we're so happy for you. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to be gone for the next 6 days, and they're going to think I'm on a work trip. So I went to my boss, told them I'm going to be gone for 6 days for a church trip, right? And I go to the airport. Everything is fine. I have my tickets, everything else. And I go to the front gate, check in everything, and I go to, not to my gate, but how the entrance into international departures. And there's one of my mom's friends. Actually, she's my great aunt. We didn't know till later, but she's my great aunt. And she's like, hey, you're here. I was like, hey, how's it going? Oh, good to see you. Oh, let me get you something. I was like, oh, that's okay. I met another friend of mine that works as a stewardess, and they're like, oh, hey, and just talking. It was like really chill and cool. Had an amazing time in Hong Kong. I came back. And my mom says, let's sit down. And I was like, okay. And she said to me, where did you really go? And I was like, huh? She's like, where did you go? And I was like, how would she know? Like, she doesn't talk to anyone in Providence. And she said, yeah, remember you saw your great aunt? And I was like, huh? I was like, wait, that's international departures. No way. So, going to America is not international from Canada. It's not considered international departure. So, just seeing my other friend who works at as a stewardess, they both talked to my mom and they said, oh, you saw me international departures. I was like, oh my gosh. And my mom said one thing to me that was really inspiring to me because, for me, I was really scared all the time, just wondering what's she going to say, what's she going to do. And she said, you can do, so many things, but just don't lie to me. And I was like, huh. And at that point, I was very, very open. I say, Mom, yeah, I went this for a church thing. And you know, she already knew at that point, she had an idea that I was in Providence. But that was the first time I actually like basically confessed everything. Like, yeah, this is what I do. I'm a missionary and I do this and I'm working at this church and this is a Providence church. And right after that, she says to me, I trust you. And that was the most comforting thing that I've ever heard. And she's always been supportive. Like, she may not agree with Providence and she doesn't want to study it, but she's very supportive. Like, she'll say, hey, how's church? I'm like, and she treats it like it's normal. So, you know, my dad's a little bit different though, because he's like, you know, he's like a typical Asian dad. So in 2015, which was 2015, I believe in July, August was the last time I've been home. Right, so it's been like 5 years. I was home before I was going to Head Lead in New York, and I was eating at the table with my mom, and my dad's lying down on the couch behind me, and he's listening to something, and as I'm like talking to my mom, like I can hear like Sunseem's Korean name. I was like, huh? And I'm listening, and my dad is straight up watching Slander. Like in front, well, behind me, but like he wants me to hear it. Like I don't know what's going on. And I'll tell you right now, at that moment, I was so pissed. Took my chair I was sitting, I stood up, I grabbed the chair, and I just threw it across the room. And my dad's like, oh, what's going on? I was like, you know what's going on? How dare you look at that? How dare you look at that? While I, you know, like when you know that I'm in that church. And he's like, what? Oh, and he's getting all nervous. And I said, forget it. And I just left the house. Like I basically walked out of the house. And, you know, as I started to walk further and further away, I was realizing to myself, okay, I have nowhere to go. I have no car, and I left my clothes at home. So where am I gonna go? Oh man, I gotta go back home. So then I had to walk back home. Embarrassing. I walk into the house and I make noises like I'm back kind of thing, but I go to pack up my bags. I'm gonna be super honest with you guys. I had nowhere to go next. So deep inside my heart, I was praying like, please let them stop me. Please let them stop me so I don't actually leave, please, right? But I'm packing my bags with anger, like, right? And I'm getting ready to zip it up. And my mom's like, where are you going? I'm like, I don't care. I'm leaving this house. What? And my mom's freaking out. And then the craziest thing happened. Like, I'm moved even thinking about it right now. Is my dad, you're talking typical Asian dad. He's like over 70 right now. They're very, you know, they don't share their feelings or anything. But my dad came to me and he hugged me. And then he says, I'm so sorry. And I was like, I've never seen this before. This old Asian guy who's never like done anything like that for me in my life. For the first time, he turns, he hugs me, and he says, I'm so sorry. And I looked at that as this great miracle that happened. That it was, I know that my dad shows love to me in many different ways. But this was the one time that it's the only thing this is the only time I needed. It was like God showing me like, hey, your dad really loves you. And then, you know, I'm so shocked. I'm so moved. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna unpack my bags. I'm like, I gotta cry. I gotta go somewhere. I gotta go back to my room. But it was really, really one of the most moving moments between me and my dad. And it happened in that way. And, you know, from this point, he's never had any, you know, big issues. And we're just very open and honest with each other. They know I'm in Providence. They know about Sunstein. They read about him. They'll even tell me, like, just casually, like, hey, you know, do you know about your teacher? Like this. Like, yep, I know. They're like, okay. And they're like, we trust you. We trust you. You know, you're old enough now, and you know, you can make up your own mind, but we trust you. So it really, really helped me in my relationship with my parents. Of course, it was a little bit rocky in the beginning when they, you know, it's not because they're angry, but because they're really worried about me. But it got to a point where I just realized in the end, everyone is just expressing love in a different way. Like I know my parents love me. And everything they did when they were so worried about me being in this history and all they knew was what the report said, I understand. That's just the way that they can express their love in that moment. So, yeah, that's is one of those moving moments for me, and I hope that it can kind of give you guys hope. In the end, it's all about love. In the end, they just want to love you. And sometimes it takes some time for them to realize that. But by the end, it's exactly what God says. Because we were created in God's image and likeness, everything is about love. Even with your parents that may seem like they don't. All right. So I hope that you guys really enjoyed that story today, and I hope that it can be something that will start off your week really well here on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. I hope that you guys will have an amazing start of the week, get a lot of things done, realize a lot of things, and what are we supposed to do this week? Resolve your issues and problems with the Word.
Believe in yourself and believe that you're somebody.
Gotta believe in yourself. Cause no one else will.